I would say a lot of the SEO folks I work with are cutting edge, but surprisingly, they're not even trying the latest models out. So it almost feels like, wow, like, okay, this is like in your face, and this is might eat your lunch, might eat your breakfast, might eat everything out of your fridge, and you're still not even trying it. Like some of them shockingly have barely tried like chat GPT or custom chat GPT, right? Like looking at
Yeah.
how indexing works. They definitely not are tuned into the RAG and the vector database stuff we talked about, because they should be. And yeah, and I think they feel like Google's just gonna go. Most of them feel it's just gonna be fine, and it's just gonna be. I think they think that the retrieval from Claude and OpenAI would just be another way to access the information. I think, yeah, and I feel like that's traditionally one of the issues I've seen is, for me, like search, we adapted to what Google had because they were the best so far. So it's more like people are trying to just answer questions that they have. They're not trying to type search queries. So it's almost like we got reverse trained to the lower threshold of what Google could offer.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the e-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to be catching up with Samir Patel, who he and I used to be sort of, I guess, somewhat competitors in the paid search technology business when I had the SaaS platform for our Maestro under Did It. So given the fact that we've both been in SEM and SEO, it's super exciting to catch up. Why don't you first sort of let us know what you're up to more recently so that that gives us some context for our conversation?
Yeah, so most of my work right now is around growth marketing and helping companies that are at significant growth level, let's say, in their 30, 40 million of revenue. And then my role would be to come in and help them prepare for IPO, or, kind of 10xing their revenue in a way. And what are the growth processes, systems, growth models? What does everything in the company need to change to be able to handle that kind of growth, and making sure there are no blocks, in the path. So whether it's personnel, whether it's analytics, whether it's, but of course my focus is more on growth and marketing, less on finance and accounting. But all those things are important, right? As you scale up, because so yeah, pretty much scaling up is one of my main fortes, and then of course working with now more AI based startups, that are intersecting in AI marketing analytics, and helping them get up the ground.
Cool. Well, analytics has been in the marketing news a lot recently because Google recently forced the entire industry who used to be on Universal Analytics to move over to GA4. And there's sort of a mixed set of feelings around that move because it's a fairly heavy lift to sort of recreate as much as you can of the analytics you were used to in GA4, but there's also some pretty significant changes. So do you have sort of a POV based on what you've been hearing from folks?
Yeah, I mean, what I've been hearing is a lot of pain. And mostly because, I mean, it is a mandatory upgrade, right? So it's just a huge additional cost of time and money and effort to be able to do that. But most companies, they have the promise of insight and action and so many good things, and I think it's in the right direction longer term. But in the short term, it's a hot mess in terms of, people kind of not. It's like, people are trying to cross a bridge, and the other side is not ready, and you're leaving like solid stable ground, and then there's quicksand on the other side. So people are kind of stuck in the middle of the bridge, trying to figure out what. But I think right now it's just adding huge amount of cost and, frustration for people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I actually have a sort of augmentation to GA4 that I'm working on within my incubator to try to replace some of the missing functionality and add some things in that should have been in GA, even universal analytics that weren't in there. And I think if I remember correctly, you're actually advising some folks in sort of the analytics space as well.
Yeah, there's a few startups that are trying to exactly do a co-pilot version of looking at all this data spread out in all these marketing channels. And as you well know, the challenge has been out forever. Like Avinash Kaushik has been screaming on his, top of his lungs, like action, action, and use analytics for something, not just like puking and looking at dashboards and, looking at data. Like, what are we doing now that impacts the North Star that we want to impact? And I think that's still a huge problem. And I think there is a new generation of startups now having the ML ops and the LLMs, leverage, do that heavy lifting of like figuring out what needs to be done and pretty much like bringing to surface what needs to be done, right? And in the context of using timelines, like we spoke about day parting, seasonality, looking at customer trends, looking at customer history. And now, because of RAG and vector databases, a lot of folks can bring their internal knowledge base also to these co-pilots. And, which has been, not there traditionally as a part of big dashboarding companies like ThoughtSpot and Domo and all those folks. They still only brought in more structured data, right, from internal databases, and maybe not all of it. But here now we have this opportunity to bring in um, knowledge from textual sources and descriptions of the business models and the products and the customers and the competition. So combining this huge amount of unstructured knowledge that can really help the structured knowledge be better and well formed and more actionable, hopefully, right? So yeah, I think all those are good things that are coming now. And yeah, I'm helping a bunch of companies get there with the next stage. So
Yeah, it's fascinating when I talk to folks in marketing, depending on how geeky they are, and I guess I probably count myself as pretty geeky.
yeah.
A lot of folks don't understand the different flavors of AI that are out there.
Yes.
Obviously, LLMs are really great at sort of language because they're large language models, but they're not
Yes.
very good at math, right? But of course,
Right.
QStar, which is the latest sort of next generation of the AI coming out of OpenAI, that one is supposed to be quite mathematically skilled.
Yes.
And some of the stuff that Google's working on within Gemini is multimodal, is also supposed to be better at math, which opens up an entirely new genre of AI. Vector databases are really good at understanding which things are like each other for product databases and understanding recommendation engines. Amazing stuff with vector databases that you can do. And of course, ML, which has been around a long time, is also very good at mathematical stuff, right? And when you and I were building bid management systems, and I, modeled Maestro's bidding algorithm off of sort of a heat-seeking missile algorithm, right? I was looking at it from that perspective. Other people used more, regressive models
Yes.
versus seeking models, and there was, they all worked, but in slightly different ways. So, it'll be fascinating to see, the opportunities once we layer in the sort of more mathematical versions of AI into analytics.
And what's exciting to me, I think right now, what's most exciting to me is like looking into RAG and vector databases
Yeah.
because as you rightly pointed out in our last conversation, is like that. In some ways, LLMs are building their internal page rank, right? In terms of like how to rank documents, how to rank information, right? And I think the RAG and the vector databases are pretty much mimicking the human ability to be able to, see more than one. So a lot of the traditional machine learning algorithms were, doing more text analysis, sentiment analysis, just looking at what's in the document. But I think with these vector documents, they can actually look at context, right? And they can look at million documents, thousand documents, hundreds of thousand documents, and actually make sense. And also, that helps build greater authority because I think yeah, yeah, I think it builds greater authority, greater understanding, greater context. It has never happened before. So yeah, it's a huge jump.
Yeah, for sure. That brings us to a topic that's of a lot of interest to marketers, which is for certain queries, it's most likely that if the person asks an LLM, whether that's Bard or it's ChatGPT directly or it's ChatGPT versus a Bing interface, there may be an erosion of the SERP, so it won't just necessarily be 10 links or 5 links or 20 links anymore, right? The LLM will just answer the question or give you a recommendation. And so the future proofing of one's sort of visibility as it relates to LLM visibility is a twist on SEO, right? That I'm not sure everybody is ready for. Based on some heavy research I've done, I feel like I have a pretty good roadmap that I'm proposing to clients around content co-creation, content syndication, digital PR, heavy citation marketing, and a little bit of a barnacle SEO kind of a strategy, which of course allows you to simultaneously do SEO that's valuable in a SERP environment and future-proof your AI. Have you been having conversations like that with the folks you talk to?
Definitely. I think both. I would say a lot of the SEO folks I work with are cutting edge, but surprisingly, they're not even trying the latest models out. So it almost feels like, wow, like, okay, this is like in your face, and this is might eat your lunch, might eat your breakfast, might eat everything out of your fridge, and you're still not even trying it. Like some of them shockingly have barely tried like chat GPT or custom chat GPT, right? Like looking at
Yeah.
how indexing works. They definitely not are tuned into the RAG and the vector database stuff we talked about, because they should be. And yeah, and I think they feel like Google's just gonna go. Most of them feel it's just gonna be fine, and it's just gonna be. I think they think that the retrieval from Claude and OpenAI would just be another way to access the information. I think, yeah, and I feel like that's traditionally one of the issues I've seen is, for me, like search, we adapted to what Google had because they were the best so far. So it's more like people are trying to just answer questions that they have. They're not trying to type search queries. So it's almost like we got reverse trained to the lower threshold of what Google could offer, right? For
Yeah.
many 20 years, right? But humans have questions, when they ask their best friend, you know what they want to know about the best restaurant or the best car or the best hiking spot to go to. They're not sending them a search query, or 2 words. Like they're asking them a question. So I think now that people are seeing that, it's like, wow, this is a question and I can get a full answer without me having to click 50 links and synthesize all of it and get an answer. It's like, whoa, wow, somebody just did it. So yeah, so I think that's one baseline that I'm seeing. And I think the second thing is, yeah, like LLMs are still very biased, for example, right, in terms of the training data, for example, is a bias. And I think they're still not as nitty gritty, and I think yeah, it's not flushed out. The algorithms like PageRank is so flushed out against spam and against this and signals and all that stuff. I think the LLM signaling and LLM ranking is still a work in progress, right? So I think that's part of it is, but it's where at least my attention is going. At least 60-70% of my time I used to spend on Google is going more to either Claude or Chat GPT.
Yeah, I think the fascinating thing about the LLM algorithms in comparison to PageRank and RankBrain and all the other things that have been cooking within Google is that the LLM learns itself, right? The LLM being an AI, right? The feedback it gets from the consumer or from the user is essentially what changes the future versions of the results, right? So
Right.
when you look at the things that are happening in parallel, the last two Google updates, interestingly enough, are look to have a secondary reasoning behind it, that they're preferring the kinds of helpful content and unique, fresh content that would not be generated by an AI, right? So I have a feeling that the two big updates that you see in the discussion boards in Webmaster World and everywhere else, which are the massive changes in the reviews portion of Google's algorithm and the helpful update, right? Both of those prefer fresh, unique, helpful content that adds new information, right? That is not just a regurgitation, which you can do very easily with an AI, right? So I have a feeling that even Google's latest algo updates to some extent are future-proofing their SERP from all the AI-generated spam that's coming out there at the moment with not just MFA sites, but just in general. You've got some fairly significant publishers now relying on AI to manufacture content. And of course, that content is based primarily on historical, unless you feed it new information in a unique way. So there's a lot of moving pieces at the moment. Those folks who are not future-proofing their SEO, I think, are going to find themselves in trouble.
I agree, because generically written things. Earlier, I think spam was, something that was hurtful or wrong. But now spam is something, which is like corporate speak, blah, 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 all these cool acronyms and strategic, blah, blah, this. All that is spam now, surprisingly, right? With AI in a way, even though it may be accurate, but, or, there may be nothing nefarious about it. It's still not, yeah, it's not boiling it down. It's not, yeah, saying something new, right? Like you said. And it doesn't have the expert knowledge and opinion, right? And this is where I see when I'm creating content, I also use AI, right, to create content now. But I'm using AI as a thought partner, right? And somebody who is, smart, as much smart as me or smarter than me, who I can work with, right, as a creative thought partner. And I could refine my own ideas and I could synthesize my own experience in words that are articulated better than I could and faster, right? So I think that's where I see it moving more, is where, there is this augmentation, right, as we talked about. So but I, when I write something, I still have to go through 15 versions of back and forth, right, with chat gpt and with with Claude, and then I come up with something, right? But
Yeah.
if I type in a question, write a blog post about this, and it just spits out basic stuff, I cut and paste that in Google, there's no way it's going to be ranked now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I would tend to agree with you. The other fun thing to do, and I don't know if you do this as well, but I always like to put myself in the role of the Google engineer who's trying to make sure that the consumer gets delighted by the content that they find, right?
Yeah.
And so some people would say, well, as long as it delighted the consumer, it shouldn't matter if it was AI generated or AI augmented or AI improved. And I think that that's true, right? But as when I start to think about an authenticity layer, right? And if I was a Google engineer and I'm trying to think, well, how can I increase the odds that what I'm actually ingesting and training my model on the AI side of Google, right, is actually authentic? And to me, one of the layers, and again, I may not be in the same mindset as they are or not, but it's always fun to go through that thought experiment, is that if you look at video and audio content, at least for the time being, until everything's fully deep faked, right? The recording of this podcast, for example, is much more likely to be real in comparison to a random piece of content that you would find on the internet, which may have been AI generated.
Yes.
So I have a feeling that perhaps, in particular, Google, who has access to all the YouTube transcripts, right, of every video conversation that's ever been had, may start to say, well, this is actually a really great training data right here, right? I can look at the people on the video. I can look at, the audio transcripts, and I can use that for training. And perhaps I should rank it a little bit better than just a random thing that I found on a kindergartner's blog, out on the internet, right, when it comes to training an LLM. So
Right.
again, that sort of dovetails into what does your content strategy look like? for current SEO best practices and future SEO best practices. It's going to be really interesting to see which things bubble up to the surface, right, as we start to run regressions against, how did an AI pick the best pizza place on the Upper West Side? How did it pick the best Caribbean cruise vacation? How did it pick, and it changes every time because it's probabilistic, right? So 10 minutes later, you ask it the same question. There's not going to be tools that can say, oh, you're ranking in the AI, because it's a probabilistic model. So there's a lot of tool providers who are going to be left completely, with nothing left to report on.
I completely agree. I mean, this is so fascinating. Yeah, and I think what you pointed out was, yeah, authenticity, and putting in real effort, right? Like we are right now. I could have generated some bullshit and posted it, or you could have said something, and posted it. I mean, it could have taken 5 minutes, but we're taking an hour, right? And we're both experts in our fields,
Yeah.
and we're taking this time to learn each other and learn, get the insights out. And I think, like you said, that will inherently be valued more, right? But again, we may even find artificially produced interviews, right? Producing spam, and then the LLM doesn't know the difference. You know what I mean? Because this will also be simulated. So yeah, it's tricky though. There will be a bias in as well, right? Because
Yeah.
maybe the quality of the blog post is better than our interview as well somewhere. So I think it's more like, yeah, the biases, they have to figure that out. And
Yeah.
but I think the eat still wins, right? Which Google has, like, expertise, authority, and trust. I think it's just that, I think, as you said last time, they're going to find signals in different content, right? And I think, and as you said last time, the more places it's syndicated at, the algorithm would be able to trust it more, right? Because it's on different topical websites that have authority.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it just comes down to some basic spiritual, religious goals, like the Ten Commandments, don't be evil, be helpful to neighbors, like be helpful to your customers, just be real and like do uh, things that help the customer, right? And help them make more money, help their business more successful, save them time, and add more value to their life. I think ultimately it's about that. And then we have to trust that these people are picking up the signals and they will put out the spam, right?
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, and the algorithms are going to change continuously. So you're going to see the Google dance like we saw in SEO. They had a party, right? If you remember back in
Yeah.
the
So
day.
they used to call it the Google Dance Party
Yeah,
at
that's the
SBS.
SEO up and down. And, yeah, YouTube creators are going through the same thing. It's like, what do I create that, ranks? Because I don't know the algorithm, so everybody's trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
But I talked to a big YouTube creator and he's like, I've just given up on figuring out what the algorithm is and focus on just high quality, authentic content, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the best takeaway I get from that statement really is that great content is in a meritocracy battle, right? So the best stuff should, if the algorithm is working, regardless of whether it's an LLM algorithm or rank brain or anything else, right? It should bubble the best stuff up to the surface, right? And obviously,
Yeah.
best is somewhat subjective, but there's so many feedback loops that Google has in particular because it owns Chrome. But pretty much all the platforms have a feedback loop where they can sort of determine, not even just as a whole, but for specific segments of consumers. Like, okay, well, this person's from a Hispanic population and this person lives in this geography. So the feedback loops should allow there to be a meritocracy where the best stuff rises to the surface if everybody's doing their job well. And spammers aren't creating the best stuff, right? And so it
Yeah.
should not rank, right? So I have
Yeah.
a feeling we'll see some of that.
And to that point, I think the latest in ML ops, right, allows you to really do sentiment analysis, much faster, right? Aggregated reviews, like gleaning with vector databases, you could make much more meaning out of, you know 40 sources of reviews for a particular car, right?
Yeah.
And then aggregate in a way that you could, like, kind of take out the bullshit and actually, like, get the essence of what is being talked about. Also take out the spam. also rank all the review providers themselves, right? Because some of
Right.
them are paid and some of them let you delete reviews, and all those things are also to be considered. But because of the scale of what's possible now, I think it can probably do it much, much faster and more efficiently.
So I wonder if you agree with one of my hypotheses, and this is that I expect to see the rollout of AI results possibly to show up first in the voice search, both in devices and also on mobile phones, because you're not disintermediating yourself to the same extent, because often there's no SERP anyway, especially on the device, right? So if you're talking to a Google device, or Amazon may finally wake up and decide that Alexa could actually get intelligent instead of where she is now,
Right.
or he is now. um, and so I feel like that's an opportunity to delight the consumer without disintermediating the revenue model to some extent. Now there may be ways of layering on a revenue model within those interfaces, the voice interfaces, but I think
Yes.
I see there's an opportunity for a significant jump in improvement in user experience when I think about voice-based questions, because the way one interacts on a voice basis lends itself more to an AI type of an answer because of the kinds of questions one typically asks in a voice experience in comparison to what one would type out in a SERP. So poke holes in that one. Do you agree with that possibility? You think they may end up iterating first with AI in voice search?
I think I completely agree with you, because I feel, as my to my earlier point, humans weren't asking each other queries, they were asking questions, right? And before there were computers, they were using voice to talk to each other for like 2 million years. So so to me it makes sense. It's a natural way, right? I think it was the inhibition was more on the, the devices, right? And maybe the training, right? And itself that, I mean, Google still, Google agent is like horrible. Every time I use it, it's like, what did you say? Week. I'm like, schedule my freaking calendar. It's like, calendar? Like what? I'm like, this is 2023, So I think one of the problems is the interface, right? But I completely agree that voice is the natural way to do it, and that should dominate it, and you should get answers back pretty quickly. I think the only thing I would say would be not on the idea, but more on like, is it going to be adopted, right? Because we have had voice even on computers for a long time. Even Google had an audio thing, you could use, but I don't know why many people are not using it. I think they're using it on the phone, but not on the computer as much.
Yeah.
And I think it also may not be used as much for long form queries, right? Because like when I'm working with Claude or Chat GPT, I'm more like looking and reading what it's sending me because it's long, 2 3 paragraphs. Then I'm putting a part of it, cutting and pasting something. Like I'm working with it longer term in an assistant way. So yeah, some of the queries like shopping queries, answers queries would be so much faster. Like, what's the weather here today? What's the weather there? I don't really need to see it. I just need to know. But for some queries that are more longer term research comparison, where I have to see stuff on the computer, it may still not replace them because it's just a different usability. But I would imagine a large chunk of it would be, yeah. And the third is like accuracy, right? If I say something, like I'm not sure if it will capture what I'm saying, right? I think that's part of the problem. I just don't have the trust in the interface.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a related element to that is, folks who are pretty geeky, we learn like how to prompt engineer, right? But will the standard consumer start to realize that if they ask questions in a certain way, they get a better answer, right? So you've got these two things moving in opposite directions. You've got humans getting smarter about asking things in the right way potentially, but you've also got the engineers at the AI portions of the organization saying, no, we have to be able to impute better. We need to understand and impute better than we currently do.
Yeah.
Not only get the word recognition right, but then really impute true intent, because sometimes people don't actually give true intent. And so,
Oh, wow, that's a great point. So maybe that's the bridge. That's the key for, getting this going in more in voice, right? Because a lot of the times the problem is I have to explain a lot, right? And I think if they can get better at I think now a lot of the latest models are checking against themselves, right? And I think so far AI has little memory, right? Claude and them, they don't have a memory of what I'm asking. So, when if it knew, like, for example, like, I'm trying to go to a hike in somewhere in California, right? And I'm telling the AI, give me the best camping ground and in Death Valley, California, right? And is it just taking it as a one time query, or does it know my preferences that I like to do car camping? I like less noise in the camping when I'm there. I like more solitude. So if it knew all those preferences from the history before, even if I type in 3 words, like it would know, right? Like you said, it can impute and compute. Like, what is it that I'm trying to ask? And then I can trust it more, right? And Google has done little. I mean, it does customize search results for most users now, but still, it's not as, like, you know, potent and
yeah,
and detailed as what Claude can do and what this can do. So I think once AI has, they have to start to have more memory.
yeah.
I think that would be amazing and have context.
Yeah, I think where Google has made some progress, right, is around imputing local intent,
Yeah.
imputing shopping intent, and imputing whether or not a video in the SERP would be a better answer than just non-video in the SERP, right? Those are examples, or news, right? So they're sort of commingling different types of content differently depending on whether it's imputing, shopping intent, learning intent, hyper local versus not hyper local. So if you start to layer AI into that, it could actually, and it understands historical context, to your point, that gets really quite delightful.
So it has way more data. Google has way more data, as you rightly said. I mean, what, 17, 18, 20 plus years for most people. Um, and it has location information that the AI doesn't have as much because it's not really, working with that dimension, right? Google is so located, it knows everything, especially if you have Android and if you're searching. So, yeah, if you combine the location data, the local information, and all that history of YouTube viewing and the web searching, yeah, I mean, it can map my mind right now if it wants.
That brings up an
Which,
interesting thought experiment for the consumer, right? Which is clearly the more information that whichever third party you feel most comfortable with having has about you, the more it can delight you because it now
yeah,
knows what kinds of camping you prefer, and it understands your location preferences, and it knows I prefer the beach over the mountains, right? And that requires a certain level of trust because I'm allowing that entity to have that historical context, right? Which
yes,
I need to be comfortable with that. But of course, the person who is perhaps more fearful about Big Brother knowing everything about them will choose the options that says, oh no, I want to be forgotten every day. Like I don't want Google or Facebook or Amazon or Bing to know
yeah,
anything about me, even as to what I did yesterday.
yes,
That person who is more privacy sensitive will eventually get a much more horrible online experience because the
yes,
experience of the person who is comfortable with the platforms knowing everything, that will iterate to the point where, wow, this assistant, right, is really delighting me all the time. It can do anything for me. And then the person who takes the Luddite path will end up having sort of the digital Luddite experience, which is going to be far inferior. And so I'm wondering if that will shape people's preferences around privacy, where they'll basically say, well, I would have liked the privacy, but to be honest, turning that on makes the internet suck for me. And so I'm actually okay with it knowing everything about me.
I agree. I agree. And I think that is going to change. And I think we're all making compromises, right?
Yeah.
Basically, like, what is it, the level of convenience we want versus giving up data? I mean, we don't need a phone to live. I mean, we do in this age, but you know, technically, you don't need anything. But yeah, but I think we're just constantly making a trade-off, and I think the trade-off is harder now, right? As you spoke, especially that I see with not letting Claude or OpenAI learn from me because I'm doing my business work, right? In Google, I'm still doing personal and a little bit of that. But here I am writing articles, writing letters, writing emails, all the content of AI. And it has much higher stakes, right? If I say, forget everything that I told you from yesterday, sometimes I'm even asking questions about my relationship. Is like, my wife did this to me today. What do I do? What's an empathetic response? Or my partner my so I'm also telling so much personal information, and I feel the stakes with like that AI, which is the Chat GPT and Claude, is much higher because it if I let it train on my old data, it's going to give me amazing refinements, right, on strategy, and that may help me get a new job and a new contract and a new promotion, right? And if I don't let it learn, then I will get very inferior responses, right? Which is very different stakes than maybe not getting a restaurant local recommendation. So I
Right.
would say, yeah,
Well, it was really wonderful catching up and brainstorming about the present and the future with you, Samir. So I look forward to staying in touch. Thanks so much for joining me for this podcast.
sounds good. It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Kevin.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.